Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the golden sands of West Africa, back to a time when the richest man on earth wasn't a tech billionaire or oil magnate, but a soft-spoken king with a serious thing for camels, mosques, and mysterious caravans that glittered under the Saharan sun. You're standing in a quiet Malian morning. The year? Sometime around 1312, give or take. The sky glows like polished copper, the air smells faintly of millet porridge and warm dust, and somewhere nearby, a griot clears his throat to recite a tale that will take days to finish. You stretch, rub the sand from your eyes, and realize you're about to inherit an empire. No pressure. Oh, and you probably won't survive this journey unless you're good with heat, bureaucratic ambiguity, and the constant jingle of camel bells. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and what time it is where you're watching from. I love seeing the global bedtime crew assemble. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are not Mansa Musa. Not yet. At the moment, you're just a well-connected nephew. The Emperor Abu Bakr II has some unusual interests, namely boats, big ones. Despite living in a landlocked part of West Africa, he's deeply obsessed with finding out what lies beyond the Atlantic Ocean. So, like any responsible ruler with access to massive resources and zero regard for maritime logistics, he outfits a fleet and sails off. He never returns. One day, he's simply gone. No note, no official obituary, just a lot of anxious whispers around the royal compound and a half-written scroll titled Ocean Thoughts. And that, dear dreamer, is how you accidentally become emperor. There's no dramatic coronation, just a slightly awkward scroll delivery and a few dozen courtiers trying to remember your name. Still, it's official. You are now Mansa Musa Keitavour, ruler of the Mali Empire. You rule over gold mines, salt routes, camel herds, and scholars who write things you'll never read. It's fine. You'll fake it till you make it. Outside your compound, the city hums. In the early light, merchants in embroidered robes haggle over cola nuts. Scribes lounge under acacia trees, ink-stained fingers flicking through Arabic manuscripts. You spot a kid chasing a chicken, a man balancing a jar on his head with unsettling grace, and somewhere, always, the muffled thunk-thunk-thunk of pestles crushing millet in wooden mortars. Despite the low-key chaos, there's order here. The empire is huge, stretching from the Atlantic coast to parts of what is now Niger, but it's mostly held together by alliances, tribute, and a firm belief in your divine right to rule. Also gold, lots of gold. The Niger River sparkles like it's showing off. You dip a toe in and think, this might be all right. But you're not just any ruler. From the moment you take the throne, you understand that image matters. You want the world to know that Mali is not just some dusty corner of Africa. No, it's a powerhouse of culture, commerce, and quiet smugness. You begin planning. A new mosque here, a royal council there. You casually mention to your advisors that maybe it's time you made the pilgrimage to Mecca, just as soon as you've packed a few things, like, say, an entourage of thousands, maybe 80 camels loaded with gold dust. You know, the essentials. Historians still argue whether you planned this to make a diplomatic splash or just like the idea of gold camels dazzling desert traders. Either way, the wheels, well, hooves, are already turning. As the sun rises higher, you head back inside your compound, stepping carefully around lounging cats and sleepy guards. You sit on a carved wooden stool, accept a bowl of sour tamarind juice, and start sketching ideas on a wax tablet. Idea number 1, build a university. Idea number 2, do not lose any camels this time. Idea number 3, find better scribes, Last guy misspelled illustrious. Your servants whisper about you, not with fear, but a kind of cautious admiration. You're no warmonger. You don't throw fits or burn villages. You just get things done, quietly, methodically, like a man trying to rearrange the world without making too much noise. And yet, the world will hear you. Eventually. Outside, a camel lets out a bored grunt. You sigh. It's going to be a long rain. You stretch your arms and look out over the compound wall. Somewhere beyond the dunes, the world waits for you to dazzle it with your peculiar combination of humility, opulence, and mild logistical overkill. But for now, the wind rustles the thatched roofs, the sun warms your bare feet, and Mali, your empire, breathes with you, steady, golden, and very much awake. You're up before dawn, again, not because of ambition or insomnia, but because camels do not care for your sleep schedule. Your caravan is beginning to take shape. In the center of your courtyard, scribes are furiously trying to count bundles of gold dust, each one neatly wrapped in leather pouches. Someone suggests weighing them. Someone else suggests not weighing them, because that might reveal how ludicrously much gold you're bringing. You nod vaguely, half listening, more interested in the list of musicians you've requested to accompany you across the Sahara. Because yes, you will absolutely need a pit orchestra. This isn't just a pilgrimage to Mecca, it's a rolling royal flex. Still, logistics, always logistics. You're told there are now 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold. That's more than 3 elephants' worth, if you're counting by elephants. There's also food, pounded millet, dried dates, preserved fish wrapped in salt skins. Tents, of course. Water skins by the hundreds. And people. So many people. There's the core royal guard, naturally, plus griots, healers, cooks, dancers, architects, imams, and an entire battalion of sandal-bearers. No one is really sure what the sandal-bearers do, except ensure your feet never touch dirt. Important work. In total, about 60,000 people, give or take. Historians still argue whether that number is wildly exaggerated. Some say it was closer to 10,000. Others insist you couldn't even see the end of the caravan when it moved. Either way, you're not traveling light. The real challenge, though, isn't how many come with you. It's who stays behind. Mali needs governance, so you appoint a deputy, your son probably. It's a bit like handing your teenage nephew the house keys before leaving on vacation. There's a lingering sense that something will catch fire, but you smile and wave. It's fine. It'll be fine. You set out at sunrise. The sound is unlike anything you've heard before. Hooves thud against packed sand. Gold clinks softly in padded bags. Drummers thrum slow rhythms to keep the pace. Children stare, mouths full of roasted yam. Old women make quiet gestures of blessing as you pass. You ride not at the front, but near it, draped in indigo robes that shimmer like ocean water. A turban shields your face from the wind, and a feather fan, waved dutifully by one of your many assistants, keeps flies away with half-hearted authority. Through towns like Walata and Taghaza, your caravan wins. In Taghaza, you pause to observe the salt mines, giant slabs of salt being carved from the earth like blocks of ice. The workers there look up at your gold-laden camels, squint, and go back to hacking at salt walls with wooden picks. You admire their indifference. At every stop, you give. That's kind of your thing. You distribute gold freely to the poor, to city officials, to anyone who looks remotely respectable. Some call you generous. Others suspect this is all part of a much larger PR campaign. You smile either way. The desert tests your patience. The heat is endless, a kind of weight pressing down on your very bones. Your lips chap, your robes cling to your skin. At night, the stars stretch out like a jeweled canopy, and remind you that, yes, you are very small, even if you have 80 camels full of treasure. You pass through oases, where palms sway lazily over brackish pools. You sit with Berber traders and talk about markets, monsoons, and Moroccan spices. You share millet cakes and listen to their theories about sea monsters. And then there's Cairo. Oh, Cairo. When you arrive, the city is not ready. At first, the Egyptians are charmed by your procession. So many dignified people, so many exotic instruments, so many polite camels. But then the gold starts flowing and doesn't stop. You give coins to beggars, yes, but also to scholars, tailors, innkeepers, and barbers. The gold ripples outward. Prices fluctuate. Merchants scramble to reset their ledgers. It's said you single-handedly destabilize Cairo's economy for a decade. Some would call that impressive, others chaotic neutral. The Sultan invites you for tea. This is the part where it gets awkward. He expects you to bow. You, however, are the Mansa of Mali, divinely appointed and slightly sunburned. Bowing to another ruler is not on the schedule. You offer polite words, heavy gifts, and a slightly too long silence instead. Historians still debate how frosty that meeting really was. Some say the Sultan smiled and accepted the slight. Others claim he muttered something about barbarians with gold under his breath. Still, you leave Cairo admired and misunderstood. More importantly, you leave with connections. Scholars from Al-Azhar, architects, poets. You invite them to Mali, promising funding and mangoes. Some say yes, some just want the mangoes. By the time you actually arrive in Mecca, your reputation precedes you. You are the Gold King, the desert monarch. The guy who gave so much gold away, it became less valuable. Your prayers are devout, your pilgrimage sincere. But it's clear, your legacy is already spreading far beyond what you can control. The Meccan sand is soft beneath your feet. The air is cooler here. You whisper your intentions to the holy stones and ask for guidance. You also ask, quietly, for camel blisters to stop being a thing. You rest, just for a few days. After all, the journey home will be just as long, and probably more dramatic. You begin the return journey reluctantly. Mecca has grown on you. The sense of reverence, the gentle bustle of scholars debating in shaded courtyards, the subtle luxury of dates that don't taste like sand. But home calls. Or perhaps it nags. Either way, Mali isn't going to rule itself. The caravan forms once more, and though it looks much the same as when you arrived, camels, dust, flapping silk canopies, something's shifted. You're more aware of the weight you carry, not the gold, but the stories, the rumors, the expectations. People now look at you like a myth that's somehow real. Also, your sandals are wearing thin, and you're beginning to resent cobblestones. Still, onward. The route takes you back through Cairo, and this time things are more complicated. Remember how you casually tanked the local economy on your first visit? Well, people are still talking about it. Some with admiration, some with very strained smiles. The price of bread, you're told, still hasn't quite recovered. Feeling oddly responsible, you do what any regretful billionaire monarch would do. You borrow gold from Egyptian lenders, just enough to remove some of what you'd flooded the market with. Essentially, you try to unspend your own wealth. Historians still debate whether this move helped or just confused everyone. Either way, you leave Cairo lighter in spirit and heavier in debt, which is not a sensation you've felt before. It's oddly humbling, but also annoying. The road west begins to blur. Days bleed into one another. The landscape shifts from sandy reds to rocky grays and then back to yellow dunes. You grow tired of dates. You fantasize about sour tamarind stew. You tell your aides to stop playing the same 3 songs on the kora every night. They ignore you gently. In the town of Ghat, high in the Ahagar Mountains, you stop for a few days. The air is crisp and thin. You sit cross-legged beside a Tuareg chieftain and share tea brewed with desert herbs that smell like firewood and memory. He tells you stories of sky gods and stone serpents. You offer stories of gold and rain prayers. It's a quiet exchange, but a powerful one. Not everything goes smoothly. You lose a camel, then two, then 10. One wanders off entirely, carrying several sacks of gold dust, a lute, and one of the scribes, who returns a day later swearing he saw a talking jackal. No one believes him, but the story sticks. Someone else gets heat stroke. A few members of the caravan turn back, exhausted. You begin noticing how people walk more slowly now. Even the musicians begin skipping songs. You pause again at Taghaza. The salt mines seem unchanged, timeless in their rawness. This time, you leave gold behind, not as a gift, but as payment. You're buying slabs of salt, not for yourself, but for trade. Because you are many things: a king, a pilgrim, a man with sore feet, but above all, a ruler who knows that wealth multiplies when you swap it smartly. At one point, the caravan splits. It's not dramatic, just practical. A detour is taken to avoid a seasonal sandstorm that's been devouring palm trees. You lose contact with a third of your entourage for nearly 2 weeks. When they return, they're thinner and oddly sunburned on just one side. They refuse to explain. You continue southward, finally stepping into the Sahel belt again, the place where desert yields to brush, where goats reappear in hilarious numbers, and where mangoes grow fat and juicy beneath low-hanging clouds. You're almost home. Almost. Before reaching Niani, though, you make one last, curious stop. You've heard stories, probably exaggerated, of a forest village where the trees hum during certain phases of the moon. The griots say it's because spirits are trapped in the wood. Your scholars say it's probably wind. You go anyway. It's quiet. No humming. But you do find a small community of ironworkers who've invented a strange bellows system made from dried gourds. They forge ceremonial blades for weddings and funerals, each one etched with swirls meant to mimic rainfall. You commission 50 of them. No reason, really. They just feel important. By now, word of your return has outpaced you. Villagers line the road for miles, beating drums, tossing cola nuts, chanting improvised songs about your travels. Some of the verses rhyme, some do not. You smile anyway. As you enter the outskirts of Niani, the city you left nearly a year ago, it feels both familiar and not. The walls are the same, but taller. The markets are louder. Your son, who may or may not have accidentally outlawed onions, is waiting nervously. You dismount, stretch your aching knees, and begin to laugh. You've seen oceans of sand, met scholars and skeptics, broken an economy with generosity, prayed beneath the holiest stars, and still, nothing feels quite like the red soil of home. The palace smells like roasted millet and lavender oil. You didn't request either, but the cooks and stewards are nervously trying to impress you after a year-long absence. Everyone's walking with that hurried grace people use around powerful rulers who might be tired or might be testy or might decide to rebuild the palace entirely with pink bricks for no reason. You are, thankfully, too sleepy to make major architectural decisions today. Your throne is just where you left it, carved from dense wood, inlaid with ivory, flanked by gold-leafed lions that were never particularly realistic, but are beloved anyway. You sit. The cushion deflates with a familiar sigh, and just like that, Mansa Musa is no longer a traveler. You are once again the heart of an empire. Time to rule. You call a meeting of your court. Advisors pour in like tea, hot, fast, and slightly bitter. There's news from the river provinces, reports of banditry in the east. Someone wants to build a goat market on royal land, and your nephew accidentally declared war on a neighboring village during a poetry contest. Misunderstanding. You take it all in with practiced nods. You've changed. Not just in the way you dress. You're wearing a robe of deep indigo now, stitched with verses from the Quran, but in the way you think. You've seen what an empire can be. You've heard how Cairo debates law and Mecca organizes charity. And now you want Mali to hum with the same rhythm, only warmer, earthier, more yours. Historians still debate whether your reforms began here or later, but this moment feels like a hinge. You start with education. There's something deeply satisfying about building schools. You commission new madrasas in Timbuktu, Jenne, and Gao, each with attached libraries. Books begin to flow into Mali like date syrup, thick and sweet and slow. You pay scribes to copy Arabic manuscripts and even a few works from Greek philosophers, just for fun. Your scholars grumble that Plato is unnecessarily long-winded. You agree. The University of Sankor, which already existed, becomes your pride. You expand it, pour gold into its walls, and import scholars from as far as Morocco and Cairo. Classes are held in courtyards and under trees. Students debate astronomy, theology, and the shape of the earth, flat, round, spherical-ish with confidence. Some evenings you sit in and listen. You don't always understand the details. But the cadence of intellectual curiosity, that you get. That you've always loved. But it's not all books and prayer. You also rebuild roads, straighten trade routes, improve caravan security, and create rest stops with shaded wells and mango trees. Traders begin whispering about how safe it is to pass through Mali. Gold flows more freely. Salt prices stabilize. Donkeys become unexpectedly expensive. You smile at that one. Now remember that time you gave away too much gold in Cairo? You've learned. Instead of flooding the market, you now control the flow. You set up regional mints. Coins begin to replace raw nuggets. Commerce becomes cleaner, more predictable. People stop stuffing their shoes with gold dust. Somewhere in all this, you commission a new mosque in Gao, made entirely of sun-baked bricks and reinforced with wooden beams that stick out like ribs. It looks a little odd, like a hedgehog had an architectural epiphany, but it works, it breathes, it glows at sunset. One of your architects suggests you make it taller. You tell him, very gently, to go count how many camels he's ever designed. He doesn't bring it up again. Now for the courts. You gather your judges, scribes, and qadis. You standardize the laws, create clear lines between Islamic law and local customs, and enforce a new system of appeals. People grumble about foreign ideas, but they quickly warm up to the idea of not having to bribe anyone just to recover a stolen goat. One of your lesser-known reforms involves postal runners. Yes, that's right. You create a relay system. Men with fast feet and even faster gossip carry messages between towns. Some of them train by running in sand. One claims he can outrun a gazelle. No one believes him, but he gets promoted anyway. Meanwhile, your gold keeps working. You fund irrigation projects. Rice fields expand. You subsidize fishing nets. Suddenly, there are more catfish in the market than buyers, and someone starts a catfish festival. You don't attend, but you send a poem about fish with existential dread. It becomes wildly popular. Still, not everything is easy. There are droughts, skirmishes. A few scholars leave, frustrated that Mali's heat curls their parchment. But most stay, because something's happening, something rich, complex, and oddly musical. You can feel it when you walk through the market in Jenne and hear 4 languages spoken in a single breath. You can see it in the faces of young girls learning to read, of blacksmiths carving verses into iron, of camel traders arguing philosophy with almond sellers. You're no longer just rich. You're building something deeper. A kind of empire that shines not just in gold, but in story, study, and song. It's late afternoon, and the light in Timbuktu feels like it's been filtered through honey. You walk through the winding streets with their earthen walls and shade-heavy corners, the kind of place where even shadows feel smart. Every few steps, someone bows or offers you a bowl of goat stew or recites a proverb about wind and camels. You nod, smile, say little. This city is your experiment, your gamble, your whispered love letter to learning. Because for all your wealth, all your caravans and conquests, what you want most now is legacy, the kind written in ink, not just etched in gold. You're in Timbuktu to build an intellectual lighthouse. You meet with Abu Ishaq es-Saheli, your favorite Andalusian poet-turned-architect, who once said he missed Granada, but not enough to give up your mangoes. He's helping you design new buildings, mosques that breathe with the wind, libraries that look like they're dreaming even when they're closed. Some scholars still argue whether you personally brought him to Mali, or whether he just liked the food too much to leave. Either way, his touch is everywhere now. Arches, courtyards, those little perforated walls that let the breeze sneak through and eavesdrop on philosophy debates. You settle into one of your new schools, just in time to catch a student presenting his theory that the moon is jealous of the sun. It's not scientifically accurate, but it's delivered with such quiet conviction that you clap anyway. At night, the stars over Timbuktu are absurdly sharp. You lie awake in your palace, which is simple but sprawling. The sounds of the city, vendors closing stalls, scholars murmuring prayers, goats arguing over who gets the best grass, drift through your window like a lullaby for someone who's far too busy to sleep. You're thinking about the manuscript you saw earlier. An old Arabic text on medicine, copied by hand on local paper, annotated in 3 languages, and illustrated with tiny, oddly cheerful diagrams of internal organs. You funded that, and that hits differently. It's not just that people are reading in your empire now. They're thinking, translating, debating. There's even a friendly rivalry between Jen and Timbuktu over who has the better astronomy lecturer. You've listened to both and decided it depends on whether you're sleepy or hungry. Meanwhile, your empire stretches like a well-trained cat. From the Atlantic to the Niger River bend, from the goldfields of Bambuk to the edge of the desert where caravans vanish like breath. Your governors send regular updates, some useful, some less so. One describes a local festival where everyone wears masks shaped like fish. You approve it without hesitation. Trade routes hum with traffic. Caravans arrive daily, loaded with salt, cola nuts, ivory, copper, and those oddly popular blue glass beads that no one knows how to make anymore. You meet merchants from Egypt, Morocco, even Sicily. One Genoese trader gives you a mechanical toy bird that flaps its wings when wounded. You pretend to be unimpressed, then wind it up 14 more times when he's gone. But it's not all smooth. A drought hits part of the empire. Crops wilt, and people start whispering about omens. You send grain, reopen old wells, dispatch poets to write reassuring verses about how the clouds are just shy this season. Somehow that works better than the food. You hold open court. People bring complaints, offerings, riddles, occasionally a goat that claims to be sacred. You listen. Sometimes you make rulings. Sometimes you just smile and give someone a job in postal management. Your people trust you, not because you're untouchable, but because you show up. Remember the camel traders? They're still talking about your Hajj. It's become legend. In markets, people argue over whether your caravan had 200 camels or 1,000. Whether you gave away so much gold that you ruined 3 economies or just one, whether your beard sparkled, you never correct them. Honestly, you're not even sure anymore. Historians still debate whether Timbuktu under your rule truly rivaled Cairo or Baghdad as a center of learning. But sitting here, sipping a date drink, and watching children learn to recite both scripture and star charts, it certainly feels like something monumental. A quiet revolution, powered by books and good sandals. You commission artists to decorate manuscripts with gold leaf, not because it's necessary. No one needs glittery calligraphy to learn legal theory, but because you can, and because it makes reading feel like opening a treasure chest. At one point, a scholar tries to convince you to ban storytelling, saying it distracts from true knowledge. You give him a week's vacation and then fund a festival for oral poets. Priorities. Your fame continues to spread. Envoys arrive from Cairo, Fez, even from European kingdoms who can't quite pronounce Mali, but are very curious about your gold reserves. You welcome them politely, offer them stew, and make them sit through a long recitation of West African proverbs before they can ask any questions. They always leave a little dazed, a little full, and somehow more respectful. And through it all, you keep building, not just roads and mosques and schools, but something less tangible, a sense of pride, of possibility. The people from your empire can think big thoughts, ask absurd questions, and still make it home in time for yam stew. You once thought gold would make you great. Now you're starting to think it's the quiet moments that matter. The boy reciting a poem to his grandmother, the girl sketching constellations in the dust, the elder explaining ethics over dried figs. And so you let Timbuktu shine, not like a fire but like a lantern, warm, steady, a little magical. You're back on the road. Well, technically, you're gliding along a shaded trail in a palanquin with cushions so soft it feels illegal. But the point is, you're traveling again. You've left Timbuktu behind for a while, off to check in on the southern provinces of your empire, where the rivers run wide, and the mangoes come with warnings because they're so juicy, they stain your clothes and possibly your dignity. Here, the air is different, damp and heavy, smelling of water lilies, grilled fish, and that sweet rot only tropical forests know how to pull off. You're not alone, of course. A column of attendants, scholars, scribes, cooks, translators, gossips, and at least one man who insists he's your cousin twice removed. You let him tag along because he makes excellent tea, moves with you like a slow river. You stop often, sometimes to hear local disputes, boundary issues, goat thefts, the occasional duel over who gets to name a new baby. Sometimes just because a waterfall looks too beautiful to ignore, and you want to feel the spray on your face like some overworked poet who needs a metaphor. You visit the gold fields of Bourré. It's not what you expect. There's no sparkling cavern of treasure, no dwarves mining with tiny hammers. Just ordinary people working with quiet dedication, panning river mud, extracting flecks of gold no larger than millet seeds. You watch, humbled. This is where your empire's wealth begins, in riverbeds and patience. The workers cheer when you give them gifts, salt, tools, cloth dyed a shade of blue, so deep it could make a knight jealous. You thank them in their language, at least, you try. They laugh at your accent, then teach you a better word for hello that translates roughly to you arrived fashionably late. You don't mind. Laughter is a kind of diplomacy. Further south, the landscape shifts again, into forest kingdoms with carved wooden gates, and kings who wear feathered crowns and play xylophones before breakfast. You trade ideas and stories, you swap diplomats. One local ruler gifts you a talking parrot who only knows how to say, "More plantains, please." You keep him anyway. But it's not all gifts and giggles. You get word that one of your northern governors is getting too ambitious, building his own army, issuing coins with his face on them. You sigh, send him a strongly worded letter and a basket of mangoes, because diplomacy should always taste sweet at first. Historians still debate whether your southern expeditions were driven by strategy or just wanderlust. They point to how often you changed routes mid-journey, or how many rare herbs you collected for research. Either way, these trips expand your reach, deepen alliances, and teach you something important. Power isn't just about borders. It's about the trust that people offer when you show up, listen, and eat their spicy stew without flinching. At one riverside village, an old woman tells you that your name means blessed rain to her people. You pretend not to tear up. You fail. The return journey is long, but rich in distraction. You pause in Jen, where the great mosque is halfway finished, its towers rising like folded paper against the sky. You approve the designs, sit in on a geometry class, and eat something described only as fermented fish cake, which turns out to be both terrifying and unforgettable. By now, your entourage includes several new scholars, a healer with knowledge of over 100 medicinal plants, and a boy who just wants to see what camels look like when they snore. Spoiler, hilariously undignified. Back in Niani, your capital, life picks up again. The court is busier now. Petitions to read, poems to critique, architecture plans to approve, lawsuits involving mysterious disappearing bananas. You handle each with care, even the bananas. You order more schools built. In each province, you want one. Not just for religion or royal propaganda, but for everything. Math, law, geography, herbal medicine. You fund a contest to see which city can produce the most creative textbook illustration. The winner? A child's watercolor of a lion studying legal codes under a baobab tree. You keep it in your study. Remember that cousin who made great tea? He now runs a trade hub near the coast, brokering deals with Berber merchants and collecting jokes from every culture he meets. You promote him, mostly so he can send you new teas monthly. You dream more vividly these days. Some nights you're in Cairo again, surrounded by scrolls and spices. Other nights, you're deep in the forest, watching dancers whirl to rhythms older than history. Once, you dream you're a camel. You wake up thirsty and oddly proud. And always, the work continues. Balancing trade routes, mediating between rival clans, listening to prophecies, approving tax revisions with doodles in the margins, and sending birthday gifts to minor nobles who think subtlety is overrated. Still, you find moments of stillness. Watching the moon rise over the Niger, listening to your parrot argue with the cook, reading old poetry that smells faintly of desert wind and ink. Your empire is vast, complicated, occasionally absurd, but it is yours. And somehow, even with all the gold, all the duties, all the sheer volume of ceremonial robes, you're still the boy who once watched his uncle weigh salt blocks and wondered how power really worked. Now you know. It's not just about ruling. It's about showing up, again and again, with patience, curiosity, and yes, occasionally, a gold-laced tunic so fabulous it makes merchants forget their math. And if your sandals are a little dusty, that just means you've walked far enough to matter. You wake up to drums, not war drums. No, these are morning drums, lazy and syncopated, calling the palace to life. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, a rooster argues with a monkey. You blink against the pale light, stretch, and decide to start the day slowly, like a story told by a grandparent with nowhere else to be. The court scribe brings news. Another caravan has returned from the Sahara. This one, however, is special. It carries not just salt and silver, but scrolls. Hundreds of them. Some copied in Fez, others smuggled out of Al-Andalus, and a few so old they smell like dust baked into papyrus. You can't read all of them, of course, not yet, but the scholars in Timbuktu will. And speaking of Timbuktu, it's grown. A few years ago, it was a sleepy river town with ideas above its station. Now, it hums with scholarship. Its streets echo with debate about astronomy, grammar, trade law, and whether the local fried dough should count as lunch or dessert. You fund a new wing for Sankore University, shaped like a half-moon, with rooms for visiting philosophers and a slightly haunted library. Nobody mentions the ghost. He minds his own business. You're not done traveling, though. This time your eyes are on the Atlantic. You want to know what lies beyond the coast. You've heard tales of green islands shaped like drums, of ships lost to sea spirits, and of a people who eat only wind. You commission an expedition. 2 large ships, well provisioned. You choose a captain known less for courage and more for being extremely good at maps. Historians still argue whether this voyage reached the New World or simply circled in heartbreak. Some records say the fleet vanished into mist. Others suggest one ship returned years later, empty save for seaweed, driftwood, and a journal that began, "We saw stars that do not exist." You don't go yourself. You're tempted, oh, you're tempted, but the Empire needs you here. Still, you stand on the shore as the ships vanish into the horizon, and you whisper something you won't admit is a prayer. Back in Niani, the seasons turn. You begin to slow down, not in power, oh no. Your word still carries weight. But you begin handing more duties to your son, a thoughtful young man with sharp eyes and the stubborn patience of a turtle wearing a crown. You mentor him not with orders, but stories. You tell him about Cairo, the minarets, the scholars, the moment you realized even gold has limits. You tell him about the South, the mango trees, the xylophone kings, the mosquito bites that felt like curses. You tell him about laughter and how it's sometimes the only thing stronger than fear. And you give him one rule: listen twice before you speak once. Meanwhile, trade is booming. From Gao to Walata, your roads are alive with movement. You've standardized tolls, cleaned up bandit trails, and even issued a set of traveler's tokens, small copper charms that grant safe passage and occasionally double as bottle openers. A new port rises near the western rivers, handling spices, ivory, and a strange new fruit from across the ocean that smells like socks but tastes like joy. Your name travels farther than your messengers. In the markets of Granada, people tell stories of a king who broke Egypt with his generosity. In Delhi, scholars argue over the exact shade of your robes. In Venice, merchants attempt to copy your caravan format, only to discover that silk doesn't drape well on donkeys. And yet, for all the gold and glory, you keep returning to the scrolls. Late at night, by oil lamp, you ask your scribes to read to you. Ancient Persian epics, Egyptian medical manuals, a surprisingly good joke book from Damascus. You nod along, sometimes correcting their pronunciation, sometimes drifting into sleep with one sandal halfway off and a cat snoring on your lap. Yes, you've adopted a palace cat. His name is Mudbrick. He has no respect for titles but an impressive talent for detecting lies. Court envoys now bribe him with fish to avoid being stared down. You never planned to become a symbol. Yet here you are. Children recite poems about your travels. Elders refer to your reign as the Golden Calm. Artists carve your likeness onto doorposts, coins, and, once, a rather ambitious mango. You handle it with grace, mostly, except for that one time someone carved your face onto a ceremonial drum and made the nose too long. You gave them a polite look and asked, "Is that how you see me in profile?" They did not answer. Still, your sense of humor keeps you grounded. You host storytelling nights in the courtyard, open to anyone. Farmers, poets, traveling musicians, even a former thief who now composes lullabies. You sit on cushions, sip sweet tea, and laugh like someone who never once debated tax law while wearing 12 pounds of embroidered linen. Your people admire you, not just for your wealth or even your wisdom, but for your warmth. You remember names, you ask questions, you pause when everyone else rushes. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the Empire holds together so well. Not fear, not conquest, but attention and love. You no longer rush. In fact, you've become a master of the strategic pause, the kind of pause that makes courtiers lean in, that causes ambassadors to wonder if you're pondering trade tariffs or simply enjoying the texture of roasted peanuts. You've found power in silence, more potent than gold, and certainly easier to carry. The Empire still hums. Your son now handles the daily rhythms, audiences, disputes, inventories of camel feed. You watch him work, nodding occasionally, offering advice only when his left eyebrow twitches. A family tell, inherited from your sister, who once negotiated peace with 3 warlords and a distracted parrot. But you still walk the markets, disguised, of course. A plain robe, no attendants, a basket under your arm like any old merchant. You move through the stalls, listen to gossip, taste pickled dates, and eavesdrop on your own legend. Today, someone swears you once turned a desert into a lake with a single prayer. You smile. Close enough. You check the weight of loaves, the honesty of scales. You ask sellers how the harvest went. You praise a girl's handmade dye. It's the color of dawn on copper. Later, the city adopts it as a formal robe shade, unofficially dubbed Mansa Blush. You commission more libraries. Not just in Timbuktu, but across the empire. In smaller towns at crossroads. Simple buildings, cool, quiet, shaded, filled with scrolls, maps, and local histories. You want your people to remember themselves. You want their children's children to know which grandmothers healed with clay, which uncles sang storms into silence. Meanwhile, the gold still glitters. The mines in Bambuk yield steadily. You've regulated extraction to prevent collapse, not just geological, but moral. No more digging till the earth screams. Workers are paid, rested, fed. You even implement a rotating festival schedule, complete with music, wrestling, and something loosely resembling pie. Historians still argue whether this policy was enlightened leadership or simply good economics. But the songs sung about you at the festivals, those speak louder than any tax document. You grow more curious about time, not just how it passes, but how it remembers. You ask your scribes to compile biographies of common folk, carpenters, bakers, those quiet heroes who shaped the world from the background. What about the man who trained our palace goats, you ask? Surely he has stories. He does. Apparently, one goat once predicted a solar eclipse. You don't question it. You start to speak more in metaphors. Your advisors adapt. When His Majesty says the fish cannot rule the tree, one whispers, he means our grain export deal with Songhai might need renegotiating. You nod. Close enough. Diplomats still arrive by the week. One brings silks from China, another spices from Zanzibar. A trader from the north presents you with an astrolabe carved with silver stars. You hold it, tilt it, and murmur, I wonder what it would say about me. No one has an answer, but someone starts writing a poem. Your court has grown eclectic. A Malian astronomer maps star patterns with a Nubian philosopher. A Somali sea captain teaches navigation to boys raised among dunes. There's even a Frenchman who got lost on his way to Jerusalem and decided he liked the couscous too much to leave. You host evening salons. Not the loud kind. These are for thinkers, dreamers, and those who play the kora like it's whispering secrets. You sip mint tea, stretch your legs, and debate whether ants have politics. One scholar insists they do. You believe him. Ants seem too organized for their own good. The people love these gatherings. And slowly, gently, your image changes. You are no longer just the gold king, the camel procession prince. You are the wise one, the listening one, the old river that still carries the moon's reflection. And yes, you're getting older. You feel it in your knees, in the way you prefer shade over sun now. You walk more slowly, lean on a carved cane shaped like a baobab root. Your laughter comes softer, but more frequently. Your dreams become stranger. Sometimes you dream of salt deserts and caravans that never end. Sometimes of birds that speak in riddles. Once, you dream of a woman with stars for eyes who tells you, even the sun bows to patience. You wake up with that sentence in your mouth. The scholars write it down, just in case. You begin writing letters to future rulers, to children yet born. You fill scrolls with thoughts, questions, small jokes, and occasional drawings of very inaccurate giraffes. If you ever feel lost, one letter says, find the market, buy some warm bread, and ask the oldest seller about the day's weather. You instruct your artisans to hide these letters in statues, behind murals, beneath throne cushions. Let them be found when needed, you say. The artisans comply, adding their own notes. The king said not to panic, even if we all vanish, especially then. You smile at that. Because deep down you know, gold fades, empires crumble, even stars dim. But kindness, that has staying power. You sit quietly now, more often than you stand. From your terrace in Timbuktu, the city unfolds beneath you, its ochre rooftops catching the dusk light, its winding alleys drifting with the scent of lentils, dust, and sandalwood. You sip spiced tea from a delicate glass, watching the horizon melt like warm wax. You've built your kingdom, but it's the spaces between the grandeur that stay with you, like the boy who painted tiny animals on the palace walls, goats with hats, fish with umbrellas, or the baker who insists that bread should tell a story, folding the dough in spirals that resemble wind patterns on the Niger River. You remember the guards who sing while patrolling, their lullaby-like chants accidentally lulling intruders to sleep. Oops, these are the memories you treasure, not declarations, not war councils, not treaties sealed with wax, but the small, ridiculous, glorious things. But you still govern. Though you've stepped back, your voice echoes through policies, in gestures more than decrees. One morning, you announce a new initiative. Every child shall be taught to read. The court scribes sputter over logistics. You merely shrug. If camels can cross a desert, surely we can teach a poem. The children start with stories, fables, riddles, jokes. A favorite one involves a turtle who becomes king by convincing a lion to retire. It's suspiciously familiar. You begin the 3-cup rule. Every official meeting must include 3 things: water, tea, and 1 shared compliment. You find diplomacy works better when someone starts with, "I've always admired the shape of your eyebrows." Even rival emissaries soften when praised for their cloak embroidery. Trade flourishes under your quieter rule. The trans-Saharan caravans now feel more like cultural exchanges than commerce. Merchants bring spices and gold, yes, but also stories, instruments, and new ways to pickle okra. One traveler teaches your chefs to make noodles. Another introduces a game with carved stones. You lose the first round and insist on best of 5. You still walk at dusk, not always far, just to the courtyard or the edge of the mosque, where shadows lengthen and laughter drifts in like migrating birds. Children chase chickens, elders trade news. You sit on a carved stool and nod along, even when you can't hear every word. The act of listening is often louder than speaking. A delegation from Egypt arrives. They bring fine papyrus, but more importantly, a box of dates so sweet they nearly erase your memory of war taxes. You welcome them, joke about your past pilgrimage, and secretly wonder whether Cairo's traffic has improved. It hasn't. They marvel at Timbuktu. Its scholars, its peace, its vast libraries where people whisper like the wind. You've built an empire of thought, one ambassador says. You smile, thinking of the fish drawings scribbled in the margins of legal scrolls. We try our best, you say. Historians still debate your greatest legacy. Some say the wealth. Others point to the mosques, the trade routes, the laws written in 4 languages. A few argue it was your ability to appear in 5 places at once. You didn't, of course. You just had a cousin who looked very similar and knew how to wear a crown at a jaunty angle. But you think it's the laughter. The way your people now chuckle when they speak your name, not out of mockery, but affection. You're less a king now, and more a shared memory, a bedtime story that opens with, "Once, there was a man who gave away so much gold that he accidentally broke the economy." You've begun composing riddles. Some are serious, others absurd. One of your favorites. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, wears sandals at noon, and takes a nap by sundown? Answer: a well-fed vizier with poor time management. Your court pretends to be stumped every time, and as the empire settles into a long golden afternoon, you sense a shift, not an end, not quite, but a soft tapering. You delegate more, you speak less, you watch the stars for longer stretches. You begin visiting villages you never had time for, not with an entourage, but alone, disguised as a traveling poet named Musa. People greet you with warmth, feed you honeyed couscous, and ask if you've heard of that one king who turned gold into kindness. You nod. He sounds tiring, you say. They laugh. One old woman hands you a carved walking stick. Tell him he did well, she whispers. You carry the stick for the rest of your life. It creaks with wisdom. You write your final letters. Not because you expect to vanish. No, you're too stubborn for that. But because you understand how paper listens differently than people. You write to your descendants, your neighbors, to whoever finds this scroll beneath a loose stone in the library wall. You end one letter with, "If you read this, it means the world still cares." Good. You pause more now, not because you're unsure, but because silence, you've learned, is a kind of punctuation. It gives shape to memory. It lets others step in and speak. And when the wind is just right, it carries your stories far beyond what gold ever could. You stand in the heat of the midday sun, feeling the rough texture of sun-baked mud under your fingers as you trace the outline of the Jingweraber Mosque in Timbuktu, a monument not just to faith, but to Mansa Musa's vision of a learned empire. This mosque, with its towering wooden beams jutting out like ancient ribs, looks fragile but has withstood centuries, thanks to the annual replastering ceremonies that turn the entire city into a hands-on classroom in architecture and tradition. You probably wouldn't survive a day in those dusty workshops, lugging buckets of mud mixed with crushed bones and straw. But hey, that's how they say the walls got their legendary strength. Historians still argue whether this fusion of Saharan earth architecture and Andalusian Islamic style was a stroke of genius or simply pragmatic necessity. The mosque isn't just a building, it's a beacon, a magnet pulling in scholars and scribes like moths to a flame. Think of Timbuktu as the OG backpack academia hotspot. Travelers arrive not with laptops, but with scrolls and ink pots, eager to study everything from astronomy and medicine to Islamic law and poetry. Musa's sponsorship didn't stop at bricks and mortar. He bankrolls entire libraries stocked with thousands of manuscripts. These aren't just dusty old texts. They're living knowledge, copied meticulously by hand, preserved through harsh Saharan winds and the relentless march of time. You might chuckle imagining a medieval university in the desert, but these institutions rivaled any European counterpart of the era. Students debated deep philosophical questions under date palms while camels napped nearby, a contrast that still boggles the modern mind. Some manuscripts suggest advanced knowledge of mathematics and astronomy that challenges the common narrative of Dark Ages. The real kicker? A few rare texts hint at connections to ancient Greek works, preserved only here in the Sahara. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu was a mere regional center or a crucial node in a transcontinental intellectual network. Oh, and the annual maintenance of these mud structures. It's like the original community service project, whole neighborhoods gathering to repair and replaster walls with a ritualistic spirit. You'd think such hands-on upkeep would get old, but it's a celebration, an event binding the people and their heritage. Mansa Musa's architectural legacy isn't just a display of wealth, it's a carefully crafted message. Mali is a kingdom of faith, learning, and culture. His investments echo through centuries, turning Timbuktu from a mere trade stop into a symbol of African intellectual achievement, a place where knowledge was as treasured as gold. You wake up in the royal palace of Mali, surrounded by the dusty heat of the savannah and the faint scent of spices carried on the breeze. It's a typical day for Mansa Musa, or as typical as it gets when you're arguably the richest man on earth, with gold literally pouring from your pockets and a whole kingdom watching your every move. Your royal schedule isn't exactly hectic by modern CEO standards, but it's packed enough to keep even the calmest ruler on his toes. You shuffle through a week of royal meals, meetings, and, yes, the occasional mild camel drama. Morning starts with a breakfast fit for a king, thick millet porridge sweetened with honey and a side of baobab fruit, sometimes washed down with fresh goat's milk. You probably wouldn't appreciate the texture if you tried it today, but back then, this simple meal was both nourishing and a reminder of Mali's fertile lands. While you chew thoughtfully, your attendants discuss the day's agenda in hushed tones. The royal court moves slowly but deliberately, much like the camels in your caravans, steady, reliable, and occasionally prone to spitting if you get too close. Speaking of camels, no week in the palace is complete without a little camel drama. Today, one of the prized gold-laden camels has decided to wander off during a royal inspection, causing mild panic among the guards. You watch with a faint smile as the camel's handler chases it around the courtyard, a scene both comical and utterly humanizing. Historians still argue whether Musa personally supervised every camel or left that to trusted stewards, but these moments reveal the day-to-day reality behind the legend. Late morning brings meetings with advisors and local chieftains. These discussions range from trade deals to disputes over grazing rights, because even empires with gold can't escape the basics of land and livestock management. You listen patiently as your council debates the best routes for caravans, the safety of pilgrims, and the distribution of wealth. These gatherings are less about pomp and more about practical governance, even if the occasional compliment about your gold comes up. Lunch is a more lavish affair, usually featuring grilled meats, fresh vegetables, and aromatic spices from across the empire. The palace kitchens bustle with activity, preparing dishes that reflect Mali's position at the crossroads of Africa's trade networks. Imagine flavors you'd never expect in the middle of the desert, brought by merchants from distant lands. You savor the meal while surrounded by musicians playing the kora, the soft strings weaving a soundtrack for your royal life. Afternoons are reserved for more formal audiences, hearing petitions from commoners, receiving envoys from neighboring kingdoms, or commissioning new architectural projects. Today, you review plans for a new mosque, nodding thoughtfully as your architects explain how to balance beauty with practicality in the harsh climate. These moments show Musa's blend of piety and pragmatism, investing gold not just in power, but in lasting cultural legacy. As the sun begins to set, you retreat to the palace gardens, a rare oasis of greenery and shade. Here you might take a quiet moment to reflect, listening to the distant calls of traders setting up camp or the occasional bray of a camel settling down for the night. It's a peaceful close to a busy day, reminding you that even a king's life has its rhythms and quiet moments. Over the course of the week, this cycle repeats with variations: feasts celebrating victories, negotiations over trade, or simply the steady hum of palace life. You realize that ruling an empire isn't just about grand gestures. It's about managing the small, daily details that keep the kingdom running smoothly. So, next time you think of Mansa Musa, don't just picture gold and caravans. Picture the smells of millet porridge, the chatter of advisors, and yes, the occasional stubborn camel stealing the show. It's these little moments that paint the fullest picture of a legendary ruler's life. You wake up one morning in the heart of the Mali Empire and realize that ruling a vast kingdom isn't just about gold and grand mosques. It's also about the less glamorous stuff like roads, wells, and yes, fountains. Welcome to Mali's minor infrastructure boom, where practical improvements quietly shape daily life and leave a surprisingly lasting impact. First off, let's talk roads. You probably think of ancient African empires as dusty tracks, barely more than animal trails. But under Mansa Musa's reign, you begin to pave main trade routes, turning them into reliable arteries connecting Timbuktu, Gao, and beyond. These aren't your modern highways. Imagine packed earth smoothed and cleared of stones, occasionally reinforced with wooden bridges over trickier terrain. Still, for traders hauling gold, salt, and cola nuts, these improved roads are game changers. Historians still argue how extensive these roadworks really were, but the effect on trade efficiency is undeniable. Better roads mean faster caravans and less wear on those famously stubborn camels. Next on the agenda, wells. You trudge across Mali's sun-baked plains, where water can be as rare as a diamond, and dig deep to bring life-giving water closer to towns and caravan stops. These wells aren't just holes in the ground. They're carefully constructed with stone linings and pulley systems to haul up water with less strain. You can almost hear the grateful sighs of merchants and travelers who no longer have to trek miles just to quench their thirst. This isn't just a luxury. It's a vital improvement that helps sustain the bustling commerce and pilgrimage routes crisscrossing the empire. Now let's get a little fancy with fountains. Yes, fountains. You stroll through palace gardens and city squares where decorative fountains aren't just for show, but for cooling the air and providing a soothing soundtrack of trickling water. Mansa Musa, it seems, has a mild obsession with fountain symmetry, commissioning designs that balance aesthetic elegance with practicality. Maybe it's a royal quirk, or maybe he's ahead of his time in urban planning. These fountains become gathering spots, places where people pause, exchange news, and escape the heat. They're a small luxury in a harsh climate, but one that shows a ruler thinking beyond immediate needs. Speaking of which, you'd be surprised how much debate goes into fountain design. Some argue for elaborate, multi-tiered structures inspired by North African influences, while others favor simple basins, more suited to local materials and climate. Historians still argue whether these fountains were purely ornamental or also served religious or social functions. The infrastructure boom also includes modest public buildings, marketplaces, and caravanserais, rest stops that provide shelter and supplies to traders and their animals. These improvements reflect Musa's practical mindset, investing wealth to keep the empire's economic engine humming smoothly, not just dazzling visitors with gold. Of course, not everything goes perfectly. There are occasional grumbles about road maintenance, and wells sometimes dry up in extreme droughts. But overall, these projects boost morale and connectivity. They transform Mali from a scattered collection of settlements into a cohesive empire, where gold flows as freely as water from a well. So next time you imagine Mansa Musa's reign, picture more than the grandiose pilgrimage and architectural feats. Think of dusty roads lined with travelers, the steady drip of fountain water in a quiet courtyard, and the grateful sigh of a camel finally reaching a well after a long day's march. It's these everyday touches that make the kingdom not just rich, but livable, and maybe even a little bit enviable. You settle into the quiet of the palace chamber, where the glow of oil lamps flickers against parchment stacked high. This is the heart of legacy planning, the gold standard way. Mansa Musa isn't just thinking about gold bars and caravans. He's pondering how to pass down an empire, a reputation, and a story that will outlive even the most stubborn camel. This section of your royal life is equal parts family drama, political chess, and a touch of medieval office politics. First, the sons. You imagine Musa's sons circling like vultures, or perhaps more politely, like eager courtiers, each wanting a piece of the throne and the empire. The question isn't just who inherits the wealth, but who can govern an empire that spans vast, diverse lands. Musa's challenge is monumental. Balance favoritism with wisdom, ambition with loyalty. History's pages offer conflicting tales. Some say Musa handpicked a capable heir. Others suggest the choice sparked rivalry and factional tension that contributed to Mali's slow fragmentation. Historians still argue how deliberate Musa was, or if fate simply took its course. Then there are the scribes, Musa's secret weapon in legacy crafting. These men, and occasionally women, are the custodians of history, recording victories, decrees, and daily royal minutiae in elegant Arabic script. They don't just transcribe, they curate. Through their pens, Musa's reign is immortalized as a golden age of wealth and piety, though they sometimes gloss over less flattering moments, like that awkward camel incident we remember from the royal courtyard. Scholars debate how much these scribes shaped history versus merely recording it. But their role is undeniable. Without them, much of Mali's grandeur would be lost to sand and time. Enter the surprisingly picky ghostwriters. Yes, even in the 14th century, Mansa Musa's speeches and official letters weren't just dashed off between camel rides. Advisors and ghostwriters helped craft messages that balanced humility, power, and devoutness, tailoring Musa's voice for foreign courts and local nobles alike. You might chuckle imagining debates over phrasing, less boastful, more poetic, or emphasize our devotion to Allah, but don't sound like you're preaching. Historians still argue how much influence these ghostwriters had, but it's clear they shaped Mali's image far beyond the gold. You also consider the material legacy, endowments for mosques, libraries, and universities. Musa's gold isn't just piled in vaults, it's invested in buildings, and knowledge meant to outlast him. These aren't mere monuments, but symbols of Mali's place on the world's cultural map. The decision to fund education and faith institutions reveals a ruler thinking beyond wealth accumulation, aiming for an enduring legacy of learning and spirituality. Some scholars debate whether this was genuine devotion or a savvy political move to solidify loyalty and power. Finally, there's the little-known detail about Musa's personal standards for royal correspondence. His ghostwriters apparently had to meet his exacting demands, rejecting drafts for errors we'd call minor typos. It humanizes the legend, even the richest man in the world fretting over commas and tone. All this shows you that legacy planning wasn't just about who got what. It was about how the story of Mali and its golden king would be told, retold, and remembered through generations. And that story, it's still unfolding today. You feel the slow pull of time as Mansa Musa's reign edges toward its twilight, a gentle fading into history's vast tapestry. But just because you're stepping off the stage doesn't mean the show ends. In fact, the whispers start swirling louder, rumors growing legs, taking on lives of their own in the dusty markets and royal courts long after you've gone. People start spinning stories about your pilgrimage to Mecca, how your caravan stretched for miles, gold spilling like magic dust across the desert, and how you single-handedly inflated the value of gold in Egypt just by passing through. Some tales say you handed out so much gold you bankrupted entire cities. Others whisper you built secret underground vaults filled with untold riches. Historians still argue over which stories are fact, which are exaggeration, and which are pure legend. But one thing's clear: your reputation becomes larger than life. Beyond wealth, your religious devotion becomes a point of fascination and mystery. Some say you disappeared on your pilgrimage, swallowed by the desert's endless sands, only to return cloaked in divine blessing. Others claim your faith was so pure it inspired generations of scholars and rulers, setting a standard for piety and generosity that echoed through the centuries. You might smile knowing that these rumors, while sometimes far from the truth, keep your legacy alive in the imaginations of millions. Then there's the quieter, more insidious kind of whisper: political intrigue. Rival factions and neighboring kingdoms debate your true intentions, with some accusing you of overextending Mali's resources or neglecting certain provinces in favor of monumental projects. A few even suggest your death triggered power struggles that led to the empire's slow decline. These murmurs add complexity to your story, reminding everyone that history isn't just about heroes, but also human flaws and consequences. Historians still argue how much these internal tensions shaped Mali's fate. In the marketplace, storytellers weave your legend into local folklore, mixing fact with fantasy. They say you could summon camels from the desert with a single word, or that your gold could turn to dust at sunrise unless shared generously. These tales may be fanciful, but they highlight how deeply you've embedded yourself in cultural memory. What's fascinating is how these rumors adapt and evolve, depending on who's telling them and when. In some eras, you're the ultimate benevolent king. In others, a cautionary tale about the dangers of wealth and power. The shifting narrative shows how your story is less a static monument and more a living, breathing myth. So even as you fade from the world, your legend takes on a life of its own, growing legs and wandering far beyond the deserts and palaces where you once ruled. And maybe that's the true mark of greatness, not just the gold you held, but the stories you leave behind. You're wandering now, drifting through the sands of time where history blurs into myth and memory waltzes with legend. The camels, the ever-stubborn, gold-laden camels, leave footprints fading slowly in the dust, just like the weight of your empire's forgotten wealth, whispering stories that only the wind seems to carry anymore. By now, the grand caravans and the shimmering gold have long since vanished from sight, but the image of Mali's Golden King endures. People picture you, the man whose pilgrimage made kingdoms tremble, whose generosity was as vast as the Sahara itself. Yet, what remains is not just gold, but a legacy tangled in mysteries and half-remembered truths. Historians still debate how much gold you truly carried, whether your empire's riches funded a golden age or sowed the seeds of decline, and how much of your story is just a shimmering mirage crafted by time. You pause and listen to the desert wind, imagining it carrying echoes of those lost treasures, perhaps the gold dust that slipped through cracks, the coins melted into the earth, or the whispered promises of wealth that never reached their destinations. The wealth that once flowed like a mighty river is now more like a trickle, hidden beneath layers of history, legend, and the shifting dunes. Your memory lives on in Timbuktu's ancient manuscripts, in the scholarly debates in university halls far from the African plains, and in the curious minds of those who look beyond the glitter to understand the man and his empire. You're less a punchline or a distant myth, and more a complex figure whose story invites exploration, an invitation to uncover not just wealth, but wisdom. And so you drift, peacefully, almost dreamily, between fact and fiction, between dusty trails and golden dreams. The camels rest, the gold glimmers faintly on the horizon, and your legacy settles gently into the sands, waiting for the next curious soul to follow its trail. As the desert night gently settles and the stars begin their slow dance across the vast, quiet sky, you feel the weight of the day's stories softly lifting from your shoulders. The golden dust of ages past drifts slowly, almost lazily, on a warm breeze, carrying with it whispers of camels resting beneath palms and the distant murmur of ancient libraries, where knowledge once hummed quietly in the shadows. There's no hurry now, just the gentle rhythm of your own breath and the comforting stillness of a world that has long since moved on, leaving behind only traces of a time when empires were built on faith, gold, and the hope of a lasting legacy. Imagine yourself reclining on soft, sun-warmed sands, the warmth fading into the coolness of the evening, as the stories of Mansa Musa's reign weave together into a tapestry that feels less like history and more like a shared dream, one that you can revisit whenever you wish, knowing it will always be there, patiently waiting. The camels, those steadfast companions, have laid down for the night, and the golden glint of wealth that once dazzled so fiercely now glows softly in the distance, like a memory that warms without blinding. So, as your eyes grow heavy and your mind drifts towards sleep, know that this journey through time is yours to keep, a quiet, gentle echo of a world both distant and familiar. Let the soft hum of history lull you deeper into rest, and may the peaceful desert breeze carry you away on a journey of dreams where stories settle softly and the past whispers sweetly into the night. Good night and sleep well.